Imagine you've spent 30 years building a $1,500,000 RRSP, and then you find out the taxman is your single biggest beneficiary. The CRA forces you to convert that RRSP to a RRIF by December 31st of the year you turn 71. On a $1,500,000 RRIF, the minimum withdrawal at 71 is 5.28%. That's $79,200 per year in forced taxable income. Stack that with CPP and OAS, and you could be looking at a 43% marginal tax rate in Ontario, plus the OAS clawback, an effective hit of over $30,000 a year in lost benefits and extra tax. Now, here's the part that should make you pause. The standard advice is withdraw early to avoid the spike. And that sounds reasonable. But almost every comparison you'll find stops the math at the withdrawal. It doesn't ask what happens to that money after you take it out. That money doesn't disappear. It lands in a taxable account where dividends, interest, and capital gains get taxed every single year. That hidden drag on your portfolio's growth, roughly 1.5% annually, can quietly turn the early withdrawal win into a loss. You think you're dodging a bullet, but you might be trading one tax for another. Today we're going to walk through this with a real example. A 57-year-old retiree named Mike. No defined benefit pension, just his RRSP and a TFSA. We'll run the actual trade-off, including the tax drag nobody talks about. If you have a large RRSP and you're trying to figure out how to keep more of your own money, this is the math you need to see before you make any move. Hit subscribe if you're a Canadian navigating a large RRSP in retirement. We cover the strategies that look past the obvious. Let's start with Mike's numbers because they make the problem real. Mike is 57. He has $1,500,000 in RRSPs and no defined benefit pension, no guaranteed monthly check waiting for him at 65. If he does nothing and converts to a RRIF at 71 with that same $1,500,000 balance, the minimum withdrawal rate at 71 is 5.28%. That's $79,200 per year in forced income before he's made a single choice. Now add CPP. If Mike takes it at 65, he's looking at about $14,000 a year. Add OAS of $8,800. His total income is now $102,000. And here's where it gets painful. The 2026 OAS clawback threshold is $95,323. Every dollar Mike earns above that line costs him 15 cents of OAS. On $102,000 of income, he loses about $1,000 of OAS per year, on top of paying a 43% marginal tax rate on that upper slice of income. That's not a calculation error. That's the system working exactly as designed. The RRIF minimum withdrawal schedule doesn't stay at 5.28% either. It climbs every year. By age 80, you're required to withdraw 6.82% of whatever's left. By 95 and beyond, the rate hits 20%. The CRA designed this schedule to draw the account down over your lifetime, which means if your RRSP grows faster than you withdraw, the mandatory amounts keep rising, and so does your tax bill. Your RRSP is supposed to be your safety net, not the CRA's next tax installment. That's the real tension here. For someone like Mike, who built this account on his own without a pension backstop, the forced income stream doesn't just create a tax problem, it undermines the whole premise of the RRSP. He saved to have control. The RRIF schedule takes that control away at 71, whether he needs the money or not. According to the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, the OAS clawback is effectively a 15% additional tax on income above $95,323 in 2026. Combined with federal and provincial marginal rates, the effective rate in that income zone can exceed 50% for Ontario residents. That's a number that should stop you mid-sentence. So the obvious fix seems clear. Withdraw early while income is low and avoid that spike. And honestly, for a lot of Canadians, some version of that is right. But here's what most of those comparisons leave out. The money you withdraw doesn't just sit there. It goes into a taxable account, and that account has a cost, a quiet annual drag on your portfolio that most projections don't model. Early withdrawal reduces the RRIF problem. It doesn't eliminate the tax. It just moves it. And if you move it into the wrong bucket, you may be trading a future problem for a present one that's just as expensive. That's the gap. And the framework for closing it is what we'll look at next. Every early withdrawal analysis asks the same question: what's my tax bracket now versus later? That's a real question, but it's incomplete. When you withdraw from your RRSP, you pay income tax today. The after-tax money goes somewhere, and most people think it goes into a TFSA or some other sheltered account. But if you've already maxed your TFSA, or if you're pulling out more than your contribution room allows, that money lands in a non-registered taxable account, and once it's there, the annual tax bill starts. Dividends get taxed every year. Interest income gets taxed every year. Even capital gains, when you rebalance, get taxed. That adds up to roughly a 1.5% annual drag on the portfolio's growth, every year, compounding in reverse. Inside your RRSP, that same portfolio grows without that friction. The real question isn't just what bracket am I in now? It's what is my lifetime after tax wealth, once I account for where the money goes after I touch it. I used to be in the withdraw early at all costs camp. I thought any tax paid now was better than a bigger tax later. Then I sat down and built a full after-tax projection for someone with no defined benefit pension, and I was surprised how often leaving the RRSP alone came out ahead. Not always, but often enough that I changed how I look at these decisions. Let's put numbers to it. Take $100,000 sitting inside an RRSP. If you leave it there and it grows at 5% annually for 20 years, it becomes $265,329. When you eventually withdraw, say at a 33% effective tax rate, you keep $177,770 after tax. Now take the early withdrawal path. You pull out $100,000 today at a 29.65% marginal rate. After tax, you have $70,350. You invest that in a taxable account, also earning 5% gross. But the annual dividend tax drag reduces your net return to about 3.5% per year. After 20 years, you have $139,500. The difference is roughly $38,000 in favor of leaving it inside the RRSP. And that's even though you paid a higher tax rate at withdrawal. Now, this doesn't mean early withdrawal is always the wrong call. If your early withdrawal bracket is meaningfully lower than your future bracket, the math can shift. If you have enough TFSA room to shelter the after-tax dollars completely, the drag disappears and the comparison changes. The calculation depends on your specific numbers, but the point is this. The framework most people use stops at the withdrawal. It compares today's tax rate to tomorrow's. It doesn't count the cost of holding that money in a taxable account for 10 or 20 years. When you add that cost in, the picture changes. For Mike, the question isn't, should I withdraw early? It's, if I withdraw early, where does that money go? And what's the real cost of parking it there? If the answer is a taxable account with no shelter, the early withdrawal benefit shrinks and may disappear entirely. The best move isn't early withdrawal or late withdrawal, it's controlling the sequence so that the tax you pay now is lower than the tax you avoid, minus the drag you pick up along the way. That's the lens we'll apply to Mike's actual situation next. Let's put Mike through a real scenario. He's 57, he retired early, no defined benefit pension, and in the first year of his retirement, the market drops 20%. That one event changes the whole equation, not just because his balance shrinks, but because of when it shrinks. A market drop in the first few years of retirement is one of the most damaging things that can happen to a long-term portfolio. You're selling at the bottom to fund your life, and the recovery doesn't fully repair the damage because there's less money left compounding. That's not a theoretical risk. It's happened to enough Canadians that it deserves its own scenario. So what does Path A look like for Mike if he does nothing? He leaves the RRSP untouched. At 57, his $1,500,000 drops to $1,200,000 in the first year of retirement. Over the following years, the market recovers, but his starting base is now smaller. By the time he converts to a RRIF at 71, his balance may not have fully recovered the lost ground, especially if he's been drawing on other savings in the meantime. Even if the RRIF balance is back near $1,500,000, the minimum withdrawal at 71 is $79,200. Add CPP at 65 of $14,000 and OAS of $8,800, and he's still above the OAS clawback threshold of $95,323. He's withdrawing money he doesn't need, at a tax rate he didn't have to pay because the schedule demands it. Worse, because the drop happened early, he lost the compounding he needed to offset the future mandatory withdrawals. The RRIF treadmill starts, and he's already behind. Path B looks different. Mike decides at age 60 to start withdrawing $50,000 per year from his RRSP. At around a 28% effective rate, he pays about $14,000 in tax each year. The remaining $36,000 after tax goes directly into his TFSA, assuming he has contribution room. He keeps doing this from age 60 to age 70. Over those 10 years, he moves roughly $360,000 out of the RRSP. After tax at that effective rate, about $252,000 goes into the TFSA over that decade. Here's what that does to his RRIF situation. With annual withdrawals of $50,000 from age 60 to 70, plus the drag of the early market drop, his RRSP balance at 71 is meaningfully lower, let's say around $900,000. The RRIF minimum at 71 on $900,000 is 5.28%, which comes out to $47,520. Add CPP of $14,000 and OAS of $8,800, and his total income is $70,320. That's well below the OAS clawback threshold of $95,323. He keeps all his OAS, he stays in a lower tax bracket, and the money that moved into his TFSA, it grows tax-free and can be withdrawn at any time without affecting his income calculations. Even if the market dropped 20% in year one, Path B reduces the RRIF exposure before the mandatory clock starts. He was already shrinking the account intentionally, so the forced withdrawals later are proportionally smaller. Mike isn't locked into either of these paths right now. Both have trade-offs. Path A is simpler, but it leaves him exposed to a forced income spike at 71 that he may not be able to plan around. Path B requires paying tax now, which is uncomfortable, but it's paying a lower rate on his terms, not a higher rate on CRA's terms. The key variable is your TFSA room. If there's nowhere to shelter the after-tax dollars, the early withdrawal benefit fades. But if you have room, and if your income in these early years is genuinely low, the window is worth using. And there's one more thing most people forget, the estate. We'll come back to that in a moment. But first, let's talk about what actually stops most people from taking action. Here's the thing most people don't talk about. Knowing this strategy and actually doing it are two different problems. Most Canadians with large RRSPs avoid early withdrawals not because they've done the math, but because paying tax now feels wrong. They'd rather spend the TFSA first, leave the RRSP alone, and deal with it later. That instinct even has a name, the tax deferral comfort trap. It feels smart to push the pain into the future, but you're pushing it into a higher tax period, with less flexibility to manage it. I get it. Writing a check for $14,000 in tax when you don't technically have to feels like losing. But that $14,000 today may save you $30,000 or more in tax later. That's not a trick, it's just arithmetic. So what does this actually look like in practice? 4 steps. First, map your income ceiling. List every source of guaranteed income you'll have, CPP, OAS if you've already started it, any part-time earnings. Choose a taxable income ceiling for the years between now and 71. In 2026, the 29.65% federal plus Ontario bracket tops out around $57,375. If your guaranteed income is well below that, the room between your income floor and that ceiling is your RRSP withdrawal window. Second, convert those withdrawals into TFSA contributions. Withdraw only enough to reach your chosen ceiling. After tax, move whatever you can into your TFSA. The 2026 new contribution limit is $7,000 plus any unused room from prior years. Every dollar that moves from RSP to TFSA permanently reduces your future RRIF obligations and shelters future growth. Third, delay CPP and OAS if you can. Deferring CPP past 65 adds 0.7% per month. That's 42% more income if you wait until 70. Deferring OAS adds 0.6% per month, or 36% more at 70. Delaying those benefits widens the low-income window when your RRSP withdrawals are most efficient. Fourth, watch the OAS clawback line. If your total income in retirement is approaching $95,323 in any given year, use TFSA withdrawals instead of more RRSP income. TFSA withdrawals don't count as income. They don't trigger the clawback. They don't push you into higher bracket. That flexibility is exactly what you built the TFSA for. I've been through a version of this myself. When I had about $800,000 in RRSPs and first ran the full projection, the numbers were uncomfortable. I started withdrawing $40,000 a year and moving it to TFSA. It felt wrong at first. 5 years later, I'm glad I didn't wait. The window doesn't stay open forever. Now, about that estate. Because even if you don't plan to leave anything behind, the final tax hit on an RRSP can be significant. And understanding it changes how you think about timing. Let's bring this together. The framework is straightforward. Even if the decision isn't know your income ceiling in the years before 71, use that window to move RRSP money into your TFSA at lower tax rates. Delay CPP and OAS to widen that window, and always account for where the after-tax dollars actually land. If they land in a taxable account, they're carrying a drag that changes the calculation. With a large RRSP and no defined benefit pension, you're in a position that most standard retirement plans weren't built for. The system assumes some of your income is guaranteed and predictable. Without that floor, you have more control and more responsibility over when and how you draw down your registered accounts. That control is worth protecting. The goal here at Brian's Canadian Retirement Playbook isn't to promise zero tax. That's not realistic for most Canadians. It's to help you make decisions with complete information so the tax you do pay is at a rate you chose at a time that made sense for you. No tricks, just the real numbers applied to real situations. If this breakdown was useful to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover tax planning, withdrawal sequencing, and retirement income strategies every week, designed for Canadians who want to stop guessing and start controlling what they keep. Remember, with RRSP money, you don't get to decide whether you pay tax. You only get to decide when. Choose wisely.